Level 1. The student pilot. The headset is too big, and the instructor's voice comes through it sounding like it's underwater. And somewhere over a flat stretch of farmland at 3,000 feet, you understand for the first time that an airplane does not want to fly straight. It wants to drift. It wants to wander off heading the second your attention moves somewhere else. And the entire discipline you are about to spend a career building starts with this one unglamorous fact: small, constant corrections, made before you can see why they're needed. You log your first solo flight at roughly 15 to 20 hours into training, 3 trips around the pattern, alone. The instructor standing on the ramp with his arms crossed, watching a person he is legally and personally responsible for take an aircraft into the air without him for the first time. Nobody tells you beforehand how loud the empty right seat is going to be.
The numbers arrive early and they don't leave. A private pilot license requires a minimum of 40 flight hours under FAA regulations, though the real-world average sits closer to 60 to 70 by the time you actually pass the check ride. Then the instrument rating comes next, the rating that teaches you to fly an airplane using nothing but 6 instruments and total trust in what they're telling you when your own inner ear is lying to you in a cloud. Then the commercial license. By the time you are sitting in front of a designated pilot examiner for the last of these tests, you have spent somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 getting here, depending on the school, the aircraft, and how many lessons got rescheduled for weather.
This is the part nobody puts in the recruiting brochure. You are not getting paid yet. You are paying. Every hour in the airplane is an hour you are funding personally against a career that has not started, on the promise that the hours will eventually convert into something. Your non-aviation friends are 3 years into actual careers building actual savings, and you are still adding up receipts for fuel surcharges and headset rentals in a logbook that, however carefully you fill it in, currently represents a financial liability rather than an asset. But you remember the solo. You remember the specific quality of silence at altitude on a clear evening, the ground turning gold below you, the radio quiet, nobody needing anything from you for exactly as long as the fuel holds out. That is the thing that is going to carry you through everything that comes after this, including the parts that are about to be much harder than learning to land.
Level 2. The Certified Flight Instructor. You get your CFI certificate and immediately discover that teaching someone to fly is a completely different skill from flying, and that almost nobody warns you about this gap before you're standing on the ramp with a 17-year-old who has never touched a control yoke and a checklist between you that suddenly feels thinner than it did yesterday. This is the time-building years, and there is no honest way to describe them except as exactly that. The FAA requires 1,500 total flight hours and an airline transport pilot certificate before most charter operators will even consider you for a jet. And the fastest, most accessible way most pilots get there is teaching other people to do what you were doing 18 months ago in airplanes that are older than you are at an hourly rate that, once you do the actual math, lands somewhere between $18 and $28 an hour with no benefits and no guaranteed schedule. You will fly with students who freeze on the controls during their first stall. You will talk a panicking 19-year-old through their first real crosswind landing while your own hands stay folded in your lap because the entire job is teaching them to do it without you, and your hands twitching toward the controls is the single biggest threat to that lesson actually working. You are making somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 a year, which sounds workable until you remember the $80,000 to $120,000 in training debt sitting underneath it, accruing interest while you fly touch and goes in a Cessna 172 for the 4th time that day.
What nobody mentions is what you're actually building here, underneath the obvious hour count. You are building the specific muscle of staying calm while someone else makes a mistake in an airplane that you are still ultimately responsible for. You are learning to read fear in a person's hands on the controls before they say a word. You are learning the very specific patience required to explain the same concept 4 different ways until the 5th way is the one that lands. None of this shows up on a logbook page. All of it is the actual foundation of every captain decision you will make for the rest of this career. 1,800 hours, 2,000, 2,300.
The logbook fills one student lesson at a time, and somewhere around the 18-month mark, the phone call comes from a charter operator who needs a right-seat pilot, and you realize the years of touch and goes were never a delay, they were the entrance fee. Level 3. The first charter seat. You take the right seat as second in command on a King Air or a light jet under FAR 135, the federal regulation that governs commercial charter operations, the one with its own duty time rules, its own rest requirements, its own entire universe of paperwork that exists because the moment money changes hands for a flight, the FAA's tolerance for risk drops to something close to zero. Your schedule does not exist in any conventional sense. You are on call. The phone can ring at 5 in the morning for a flight that didn't exist on any calendar 12 hours earlier because the entire business model of charter is built on availability rather than routine. A client needs to be in Aspen by 10. The airplane that was scheduled for maintenance got cleared early, and the operations desk needs a crew in position at the airport in 90 minutes. You learn to keep a bag packed at all times, not packed loosely, packed specifically the way someone packs when they have learned the hard way what happens when they don't. You are making somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 a year. And the math on that number only works once you stop comparing it to a normal job with a normal schedule. Because this is not a normal job with a normal schedule. You might fly 6 hours one day and sit in a hotel room in a city you didn't choose for 36 hours waiting for the return leg, technically working the entire time because you are not free to leave, not free to drink, not free to do anything except be ready. The captain you fly with teaches you things that exist nowhere in any manual. How to read a weather brief and find the one detail that actually matters buried in 11 paragraphs of aviation boilerplate. How to handle a client who is furious about a 2-hour weather delay without ever raising your voice, because the airplane is not going to fly into that line of thunderstorms regardless of how much the seat in the back paid for the privilege of being annoyed about it. How to do a full pre-flight inspection at 4 in the morning with the kind of attention that doesn't degrade just because it's the 4th 4 in the morning pre-flight this week. You log empty legs, flights with no passengers, repositioning the aircraft for the next job, and deadhead legs, riding as a passenger on someone else's flight to get yourself to where you're needed next. The miles add up. The actual flight hours that count toward your next certificate add up slower than you'd like, because not every leg in this job builds your logbook the way you expected it to when this still felt theoretical. Level 4. Captain Upgrade. The simulator session that decides whether you upgrade to captain is 4 days long, runs in a full-motion simulator that costs more per hour to operate than most people's monthly salary, and ends with a check airman in the seat behind you running engine failures, fires, and decompression events back-to-back until your hands know what to do before your brain finishes processing the alarm. You pass. You are now the pilot in command, the legal final authority on every decision involving that aircraft, which means the go or no-go call on a marginal weather day is now yours, not something you watch someone else make and silently agree or disagree with from the right seat. The first time you make that call alone, delaying a flight that a client very much wanted on time, because the crosswind component at the destination airport exceeds the aircraft's certified limit by 4 knots, you understand that this is the actual job, not the flying, the deciding. You are making somewhere between $80,000 and $110,000 a year now flying a light jet, a Citation CJ1 or CJ2, something in that class, typically single pilot certified or with a new SIC of your own in the right seat. The person you were 18 months ago sitting where you used to sit, asking the same questions you used to ask. The type rating you just earned is registration specific in the sense that it certifies you on that exact aircraft type and nothing else, which means every time you move to a different airframe for the rest of this career, you go back into a simulator and do this entire process again. Pilots stop thinking of this as starting over. They start thinking of it as the price of admission to the next airplane, paid in full each time. No loyalty discount for experience on a different jet. Clients start to know your name specifically now, not just the operator's name on the side of the aircraft. A repeat client requests you by name for a flight 8 months out. And there's a specific, quiet satisfaction in that, which has nothing to do with the paycheck. The realization that the trust here is not abstract. It is built one safely completed flight at a time, with someone whose business depends on getting somewhere intact, on time, without incident, and who has decided you are the person who delivers that. Level 5. The Mid-Size Cabin Captain. The aircraft gets bigger, and so does everything else. You move into a mid-size or super mid-jet, something in the Citation Excel, Hawker 800, or Challenger 300 class, and the operational complexity climbs with the cabin size. International flights enter the picture now. Customs procedures, fuel planning across time zones, the specific headache of a slot time at a European airport that does not care even slightly about your scheduling preferences. You are making somewhere between $120,000 and $160,000 a year, and the duty time regulations under Part 135 are now the actual architecture of your life rather than a paragraph in a manual you skimmed in training. 14 hours of duty time maximum. 10 hours of required rest before the next duty period. You start planning trips backward from the rest requirement the way other professionals plan around a budget. Every decision filtered through the question of whether this schedule keeps everyone legal and, more importantly, keeps everyone rested enough to actually be safe, which are related questions but not identical ones. The clients change at this altitude of the business too. You are flying high net worth families, corporate executives, occasionally a public figure who needs the specific discretion that charter exists to provide. You learn things about people's lives that you will never repeat to anyone, not because you signed something, though you did, but because the entire profession runs on the understanding that what happens in that cabin stays in that cabin. A divorce being arranged mid-flight, a business deal collapsing over the in-flight phone, a family in genuine crisis flying to be somewhere they didn't expect to need to be. You become professionally invisible in a way that takes real discipline to maintain. You also start mentoring now, in a quieter way than the CFI years, without the formal structure. The young SIC in your right seat asks the questions you used to ask, and you find yourself giving the same kind of answer your old captain gave you, the kind that explains not just the procedure, but the actual reasoning behind it. Because procedures without reasoning don't survive the first time reality doesn't match the textbook scenario.
Level 6. Senior Captain, Large Cabin. You move up into large cabin and ultra-long-range aircraft, a Gulfstream G650, a Bombardier Global 7500, aircraft that can cross oceans without stopping and that cost more than most houses to operate for a single flight. The salary data for this tier of charter flying sits between roughly $175,000 and $230,000 a year at the upper end of the profession. And you are squarely in that range now, sometimes above it depending on the operator and the specific aircraft. NetJets and the major fractional operators have spent the past 2 years aggressively raising pay scales to retain senior captains. One operator alone increased compensation by more than 50% in a single contract cycle, specifically to keep its most experienced pilots from leaving for competitors, which tells you everything about how tight the market for genuinely senior charter captains has become.
You are not easy to replace anymore. You know it, the operators know it. The flights themselves get longer and stranger in their specific demands. A 14-hour leg across the Pacific with a full cabin of passengers asleep behind you means hours of monitoring systems, managing fuel burn against headwinds that shift throughout the flight, and staying mentally sharp through the specific fatigue of the deep middle of an overnight crossing when your body is convinced it should be asleep and your job requires the opposite. You have learned by now exactly how your own body handles this because you have done it enough times to know your specific tells. The moment coffee stops working, the moment you need to stand up and walk the length of the cabin just to reset something in your attention that coffee can't reach.
The clients at this level are sometimes people whose names you'd recognize, and you have learned the specific professionalism of treating a head of state and an anonymous private client with exactly the same level of care, because the airplane does not know who is sitting in the back, and neither, professionally, do you. Your job is identical regardless of who paid for the flight.
get them there, intact, on time, without a single person in that cabin ever having reason to think about the mechanics of how that happened. Level 7, Director of Operations. The promotion comes with a desk, and the desk is the part nobody fully prepares you for. You are still flying. Most directors of operations at charter companies maintain flight currency and fly regular trips, but you are now also legally and personally responsible for the entire operations compliance with FAA regulations, training standards, and safety culture, which means your name is on documents that the FAA reviews during audits, and your decisions affect every pilot on the certificate, not just the passengers in your own cockpit. You become a check airman, conducting the same kind of evaluation flights that once decided your own upgrade, sitting in the jump seat, watching a captain candidate make decisions under simulated pressure, deciding whether they're ready for the authority you handed yourself years ago. There's a specific full-circle quality to watching someone freeze for half a second during a simulated engine failure and recognizing completely the exact moment you are watching, because you had that exact half second once, in a different simulator, a different decade. You are making somewhere in the range of $160,000 to $200,000 a year in this role, the number less important now than the actual texture of the responsibility. A pilot calls in sick 40 minutes before a scheduled departure, and the staffing decision is yours. A maintenance discrepancy gets reported, and the go or no-go call that used to be about one aircraft and one trip is now about an operational standard that applies to every aircraft on your certificate. You read every incident report that comes through the company now, not because you have to in a narrow legal sense, but because every one of them is a sentence in the same story you've been writing your entire career. The story about what it actually costs in attention and discipline and refusal to cut a corner to get people safely from one place to another in a machine that does not forgive carelessness. Level 8, the veteran captain. 25 years in, and the logbook is less a record now than an archive. 11,000, 12,000 flight hours, type ratings on 4 or 5 different aircraft, each one its own 4-day simulator gauntlet completed and passed, and mostly forgotten in the specific way that mastered things become invisible to the person who mastered them. You fly less than you used to, by choice as much as by role. The hands still know the airplane the way they always did, maybe better because 25 years of small corrections made before you can see why they're needed has become so completely automatic that flying the aircraft is no longer where most of your attention goes during a flight. Most of your attention goes to the things that took 2.5 decades to learn to watch for. The subtle shift in a weather pattern 40 minutes ahead of where the radar currently shows trouble. The particular way a new SIC's voice changes half a second before they're about to say something they're not fully sure about. The things you cannot teach directly because they only arrive through exactly this many hours of paying close attention. You remember the solo flight at the very beginning of all of this. The headset too big, the radio silent, the ground turning gold below you with absolutely nobody needing anything from you. You remember it specifically because that feeling, uncomplicated, complete, entirely your own, turned out to be the thing every level of this career has been quietly trying to protect. Underneath every regulation, every simulator check, every 4 a.m. pre-flight, every 14-hour duty day calculated backward from a mandatory rest requirement. The job at every level was never really about getting bigger airplanes or larger paychecks, even though both of those things happened along the way and both of them mattered. The job was always about earning, one flight at a time, the right to sit in that seat and be trusted completely with something that cannot be taken back if you get it wrong. You taught a teenager to fly a Cessna once, hands folded in your lap while they white-knuckled their first crosswind landing. That teenager is a captain somewhere now, on an airplane you've never flown, making the same go or no-go calls you made for the first time on a marginal weather day a long time ago, building the same muscle you built, one small correction at a time. The airplane never asked who was sitting in the back. It only ever asked whether you were paying attention. For 25 years, you were. Subscribe for more videos like this.